Dr. Stephen Korn, who is at NINDS, and will be talking to us about Career Development Awards. It is just a pleasure to have him here, and some of you hopefully have meetings set up with him this afternoon. It is just always a delight to hear Dr. Korn talk, and without further ado, I'll take it away.
Thank you. It's good to be here. It's always good to be here. Change of direction. We're going to talk about money, but it's actually much more important than money. I was thinking today, we at NINDS often hear the word grantsmanship, and grantsmanship is a real thing, but I hate that word because people use it as an excuse. And your reviewers using it as an excuse, and NINDS staff uses it as an excuse. And there is such a thing. There are people who can write a great grant, and people who write terrible grants. But I like to think more that if you can't write clearly, you're not thinking clearly. And it's really a much more useful concept. If you can't write it clearly, you haven't thought clearly. So forget about whether you're James Michener or not. Anyway, I'm not going to tell you how to write a grant. I don't know how to write a grant. But we're going to talk about all the stuff that you should be doing and shouldn't be doing. And it relates to your work. And we talk about grants, but reviewers are actually mostly smart. And when they find fault with your application, it's usually they're right. And it's because you're doing something wrong in your work or your career development or whatever is the relevant issue. It's not that you didn't write it clearly, it's that you're not doing it clearly. And so I want to talk about all those things. We'll talk about funding opportunities. This is stuff you can get off the website, but I'll go through it a little bit. I want to show you some data. The reason I show data is because, well, in this day and age, maybe it's not meaningful, but you could believe what you want to believe, but I've got data to tell you what the truth is, if truth is truth anymore. And I'm going to give you some tidbits about setting yourself up for success, and of course the converse, the futility aspect. You can set yourself up for failure also. All right, let's just get through these funding mechanisms. I'm going to go really quickly. I'm between you and lunch. I had too little time before. I have less time now. I assume many of you are pre-K and hoping to get to a K. I was just asked yesterday, I think, why bother with a K? Why not just go straight to an R01? As clinicians, the most valuable thing you can get is time. What the Ks are designed to do is not to give you a lot of research money. It's designed to protect your time so that you have time to get up and running in your research. And you're in a mentored situation, which means you're working with somebody else who better have money, and that person had better be willing to spend some of that money on you. And so really what these are for to protect your time. 75% effort for virtually everybody except neurosurgeons. Neurosurgeons get 50%. The reasoning behind that is because generally their surgery is part of their research. So they're, in a sense, they're double dipping the clinical and the research time. Gives you 5 years of protection time. You can ask for 4. NINDS will not make a K award for less than 4. It seems silly to us, other institutes will. It's salary and fringe, the amounts vary, research costs, the amounts vary, NINDS gets you $50,000 a year. If you're writing a K award and your research is going to cost more than $50,000 a year, you need to state in that application how much you expect the research to cost and where you're going to get the money from. And if you're getting the money from somebody other than your own bank account, you need that person to write a letter saying, yes, I am committing these funds to you for this research. Because if you can't do the research, it doesn't matter how great a project it is, if you don't have the money to do it, you can't do it. There are 12 pages. You have to be a U.S. citizen or permanent resident for everything except K99. K99 is a transition to independence. It is not generally for clinicians, but clinicians do quite well when they apply. You just have to be in the right spot in your career. It's for 2 years of being in a mentored position, and then you go off and get a tenure-track position, and you're on your own. And if that is what your position is, then clinicians do quite well. So it's 2 years of mentor, 3 years of R00 if you get an appropriate tenure track position. One of the nice things about this is it has to come with appropriate startup, and we won't award the R00 if you don't get an appropriate startup package. There's the Borough's Welcome Award, a faculty development, career development award that's kind of like that, and they actually use that as a negotiating tool for tenure and for startup package. So that's one of the benefits of these sorts of things that you don't really get with a KO8 and a KO1. KO2 NINDS is the only institute that uses the KO2 this way. Other institutes use it a different way. But it's a bridge between a mentored K, where you're working with somebody else, and an R01. If you've done everything you're supposed to do in your mentored K, you're not quite, as a career development component, you're missing, you need to learn something new before you're be credible for an R01. An example of this would be somebody who's done clinical research or even a single-site clinical trial, and their R01 is going to be a multi-site clinical trial. No way you're going to put in your own R01 to do a multi-site clinical trial having no experience in doing it and get that grant. A KO2 is a really good way to say, hey, I've done great work, I've got a great idea for a multi-site trial, but I have no experience. Here's where I'm going to get my experience. And we'll give you another K. And that's also a 5-year award to protect your time. So it's a great award to have, because then when you get your R01, you don't have to spend your R01 in your own salary. You've got the KO2 to spend in your own salary. And it makes your R01 bigger. You have to get the R01 by the start of year 4, or you lose the K, because enough K is enough K. How much do you need? But it's something to keep in mind. NINDS is the only institute that has it. Not many people get them because it's not appropriate for most people. But if it is something that's appropriate for you, it's a good thing to think about. Later on, this is K24 for mid-career. It's about mentoring. NINDS doesn't offer it anymore. Some other institutes do. We're all for mentoring, and I'll talk a little more about that in a second. You need good mentors. You want to turn around and mentor people behind you. That's the way the system will work best. This gives you the time to do it. We don't support it because we weren't getting anything useful to us. Just to make a digression, though, how important mentoring is to us, NINDS started this Landis Award. Last year was the first year, and we are giving cash money to people who get this award, and it is for outstanding mentorship. And people are nominated by current and former trainees only, not by chairs, not by faculty, not by deans. It's your current and former trainees that nominate you for this. And we have an internal committee that looks at all of these nominations, and we get more information. And we are making awards to people who have spent their time mentoring others in a really great way. We really do think this is critical. We'll talk more about that soon. Loan repayment, I hope all of you know about this. NIH will pay off your debt if you're doing certain kinds of research. All of you in this room, I assume, are doing patient-oriented research of some sort. You are qualified under clinical research or pediatric research. It can be any kind of research. NINDS uses it primarily for clinicians. If you are eligible for this and you have debt, you should apply. There's congressionally mandated money for this. We have more money than we have to spend on clinicians. Okay, we have more money than we know how to spend on clinicians, and we can't use it for anything else. So if you're eligible, apply. It's a contract, it's not a grant. You basically say, here I am. And we say, wow, here's money. It's not quite that simple, but it's close.
It took me 3 tries, but
it's not quite that simple, but or at least for some, it's not quite that simple. All right. What else have we got? Oh, institutional awards. There are institutional awards. I don't know where all of you are. If you're a pediatric neurologist, there is a national K-12 for pediatric neurologists. It is a way to get you on your feet on the way to a K, a mentored K. If you are ready for a mentored K, go for it. If you think you are not, There's this K-12 you can apply to. It's a national program. It gets you involved with all the pediatric neurologists in the country that are kind of at your level, plus with a huge senior faculty group. It's something that you ought to be applying for if you're a pediatric neurologist. If there are any neurosurgeons in the room, the NR-CDP is a national program. You're eligible to apply in your first faculty year only. It's to get you on your feet, to get to a K or an R, or whatever is next. Other institutes have other kinds. These are institutional awards. All of these institutional awards are at your institutions. So you'd only be eligible for it if you have one at your institution. There are lots of them flying around. All of them have the same outcome mandate. Get to an individual award. That's what we're trying to do. We're trying to get you on your feet with an individual award. T32s, I don't want to spend time on this. There are some T32s floating around for clinicians. The same mandate, get to a K. That's what it is, get to a K. The trick is to get to a K. I'm going to show you data. It's a little bit old, but nothing's changed. That if you get yourselves to a K, you will succeed. Period. The data are that you will succeed if you get yourself to a K. The tough part's getting to the K. And really, if you put your minds to it, all of you in this room can get to a K. There's an R25, you're all probably past this, you have to start residency. I just want to bring this up for a couple of reasons. Number one, we started this program 9 years ago. It funds people in residency to do research. If you get the award for residency, we guarantee 2 years of fellowship. It was to keep people in the pipeline. It's also to get them to a K more quickly. The time from residency to K, I guess I'm going to show you the data, was about 5 or 6 years. Seemed a bit much. We're hoping to get people to Ks more quickly than that. We've done some things to do that. Here's the data. The R25 has taken 2 years off the time to get from residency to K. And the reason, hopefully, is here. These are really the lessons from the R25, is get going, right? That's what the R25 is. Get going. Come up with a plan. We make you come up with a plan before you start your research, not start your research and then come up with a plan. There's a deadline on it. You're going to apply for a K after 18 months of fellowship, or you're not getting any more fellowship money. Right? Apply. And the shocking part of it is, when people apply, they actually get funded much more quickly than when they don't apply. And really, those are the lessons. Have a plan, get a good mentor, and apply. Right? Simple, but it's effective. We also instituted this policy a couple of years ago. What you would hear in review, the case study section, you'd listen to the reviewers and it would make you crazy. Reviewer number one says, wow, this person had some great work. Maybe they were an MD, PhD, and they did spectacular work as a PhD. And they haven't done anything for the last 4 or 5 years. And reviewer two says, yeah, they were in residency. And reviewer one says, yeah, but they still haven't done anything. And he said, we're tired of listening to this. So we now have instructed the reviewers, and this is published policy, that if somebody has done a nice research project and published it as a leader on that project, then don't wait for them to publish after residency. If they have a good application and all they're missing is that they haven't published it yet, don't worry about it, right? They've already shown they can publish. And this is even if you change research areas. If you're doing something completely new, if you have good preliminary data and it shows you're on your way, don't worry about getting it published, all right? Taking time off training. This is only NINDS. We've also started a fellowship PhD program. The long-range goal, which may happen in 100 years, is that we would like to see this replace MD PhD programs. It would take about 5 years off of training if we could associate the training with fellowship and not medical school. I don't see that happening in my lifetime, but this is for clinicians who've never done research. It's a way of getting high-quality research training during fellowship and a little bit beyond. We will pay you to get a PhD. All right. Where are you headed? The RO1 is the bread and butter. You've heard lots about them. It's as much money as you need, more or less. Don't be afraid of it, just be ready for it. Once you get a K, you can apply anytime, you don't have to wait. You don't have to wait 5 years after your K to get an R1. Turn around the next year and get it, that's fine with us. In fact, we incentivize you getting it early in NINDS. There are other choices, the DP2 New Innovator Award, for any of you who have research that's so exciting you can't get an R1 for it. The DP2 might be for you. It's 6 pages, no preliminary data. It's about your ideas. Clinicians do quite well. Clinicians have about 20% of these. The success rate is low because it's a 6-page, no preliminary data grant. If you have an idea, apply. If you have an R1, you're not eligible for it. If you've ever gotten it, it's your first award. It's for a great idea. Clinicians get a bunch of them because you have really cool ideas about how to do things for patients. There are other things we don't need to talk about right now. There are lots of mechanisms. I don't want to get into it because there are millions of them. Policy practices. You all know about new investigator, early stage investigator. A new investigator is somebody who's never had an R01. So you can be 120 years old and be a new investigator. An ESI is somebody who's never had an R01 who's within 10 years of degree or clinical training. There are different pay lines, and this is huge, all right? So this is a listing of NINDS pay lines for the last number of years. And to give you an idea, for those of you who don't have a sense of what these numbers mean, single-digit pay lines research is unsustainable. You cannot expect people to succeed with single-digit pay lines. On the other hand, my view is at the 25th percentile, if you can't come into the 25th percentile often enough to have a good career, you're in the wrong business. 25th percentile doesn't mean only 25% of people get funded. It's that round 25% of grants are funded, more or less. And so you ought to be able to come into that often enough to have a wonderful career. So what's the difference in pay line for established people? You can see what they are. 2018, we're at 15. 2017, last year, we went down to 12. And that was because we had no idea what was going on with the budget. We tend to be conservative so we don't end up in a hole and be at 8 next year. Because most of the money is in out years, right? You make it a 5-year award, you know what you're doing this year, but now you've got 4 more years you have to pay, and if the budget falls apart, we're still on the hook for those 4 years, and then there can be no new grants, and the pay line plunges. So we tend to be conservative in NINDS. We went down to 12 last year, but now we're back up to 15. Which seems to kind of be the new normal. But ESIs are 25. So if your first R1, the pay line is 25 percentile. It's not that bad. In fact, it's quite good. Historically, it's quite good. All right, what's the ESI benefit done? It's taken 2 years off the time it takes to get an R1. You don't have to wait to get into the 10th percentile, you can get it inside the 25th percentile. You don't wait in line. I'm going to show you some success rates. NIH reports application success rates, number of awards per application number. I like to think of applicants. I don't care if it takes you 2 or 3 tries. I just care that you ultimately get your grant. So I think in terms of applicant success rates, okay, they're higher. Here are application success rates NIH-wide. The point I want to make is that NIH recognizes that we need to keep the pipeline open. These are clinician Ks, the K08, K23, K24. The dates here, 2003 was the end of the doubling. NIH was rolling in dough, didn't know how to spend it. Said, here, take some money. We don't know what to do with it. That was the success rate for K. Okay. 2008 was the bottom of the pit. The economy had fallen out in 2007. It was in the gutter in 2008. And the success rates basically stayed the same for Ks. Right? Lots of other people didn't get funded, but the Ks kept getting funded. You can see as we climbed out of the gutter, it stayed the same. 2017 is the latest data I have. It's basically the same. It doesn't matter for NIH, lots of money, no money, little bit of money. The clinician Ks are being held constant because NIH recognizes the value and the need to keep clinicians coming in the pipeline. These are NINDS applicant success rates. These are the last few years, which are the relevant ones, basically 50%. The MD K23s, so the K23s tend to be a little bit lower, which is what most of you are going to be after if you're doing patient-oriented research. And the success rate is lower, largely because it's just plain harder to do patient-oriented research than it is to do studies in a dish or in an animal in the lab where you can control things a lot better. It's harder to design a good experiment. So these are the numbers. And for MDs, it's harder to get a K23 because you have less research experience. And it takes more time. All right, so the success rate is lower. That said, I think, well, I'll go through these first and then I'll make comments about NANDS. There are people who think, oh, I'll just submit one because you never get it on the first try. And so I'll submit it and get the reviewer comments and then write the real one. And I just want to show you how many of the awards that are made, how many are made on the first submission and how many are made on the second submission or a later submission. All right? About half of them go out on the first submission. All right? So my advice is always, why not write the good one the first time and save yourself a lot of anxiety and time. Right? You're not more likely to get it the second time. You're just going to write it well the first time. R01 success rates, I'll throw these in here just to show you. They hover, for new applications, they hover around 20% plus or minus. We dropped down to 15% last year because of our 12% pay line. We're usually up around 18 or 19%. Last year was a glitch. Down the bottom, if you can see that low on the slide, of the 2011-12 data, we had a pay line of 14-15%. These numbers for new and renewals were 18 and 33%. Which, by the way, renewals have always been higher. You were given a lot of money for 5 years. Reviewers say, what do you do with it? If you do good things with it, you get more money. So it's a benefit. On the other hand, the second R01 is the hardest R01 you'll ever go for in your life, right? Because if you didn't do great things with the first one, they say, wow, you just had 5 years worth of a lot of money and you didn't do much, right? So it's both the hardest and the easiest one to get, right? So whatever that's worth. The numbers down the bottom show you those for a reason. 14, 15 percentile, that's where we are right now. 18% success rate is where we would be at a 15 percentile. Here are applicant success rates. All right, look at the MDs and the MD PhDs as compared to the PhDs. Look at the ESIs as compared to everybody else. Your first R01 as a clinician, you're basically a 35-40% chance of getting it. Okay, maybe not the first time, maybe not the first submission, but you get it. That's a pretty hefty success rate. 35-40% of the people that say, hey, can I have a few $1 million, please? They get it. This is the K to R transition. The data are old to 2012 analysis, but we analyzed during the worst period of time, right? When the budget was horrible. We asked the question, how many of the Ks get R01s? Well, 40% of all the Ks get them, 50-60% of the ones who try get them. Another lesson, if you try, you're more likely to get it than if you don't try. I don't think this has changed. All right, it's done in 2012, nothing's different. We went and found where everybody was, we found what they were doing, we looked at their funding. Turns out 75% of all Ks at NINDS had post-K independent research funding. We consider that basically 100% because some people are leaving their K and just being collaborators on research projects and not applying for their own grants, or they're going to lose a few to the clinic. 75% of Ks have post-K independent research funding. Basically, Almost all of them are in academic positions 5 to 10 years later. Everybody who's in an academic position is publishing 5 to 10 years after the year from a K. Right? If you get to a K and you want to succeed in research, the data say you will. Okay? You got to get to the K. This is the K99. I just want to show you the bottom line here. I use this for the PhDs because it's mostly PhDs that get this. Look at the bottom line. You see the bottom line? 84%. So the K99R00 basically goes to the best postdocs in the country. They're not brilliant. They're not geniuses. They just have their acts together. And they're smart. And they're ready and they get this. They're really good. They're really good scientists. But that's what they are. They're really good. 84% of the people that get this award have gotten an R01 or a TP2. Okay, so when you hear about success rates of 15, 20, 25%, if you're good, 84% of the junior people have gotten it. Right? The trick is to be good. And that's partly obviously what this course is about, is teaching you how to do it right and not make mistakes that people make to not get their grants. And you should expect that. You're asking the taxpayer to give you millions and millions of dollars, and the patients want you to do this work that's going to benefit them. You should be doing good work, and you should be doing important work. And you should expect to not be funded if you're not doing something important and you're not doing it well, or you're not doing it. All right, these are some things that come up. This is sort of a bunch of preaching. I apologize, some of it may sound preachy, but this just comes out of what we see from grant applications. First of all, there is not one NIH. There are 27 different NIHs. We are all different. We all have different policies, personalities. If you're applying to NINDS, you want to know what NINDS wants. If you're applying to NEI, you want to know what NEI wants. We're all really different, even the way we evaluate grant applications. So get in touch with people who know. Don't get advice, if you're applying for a K from NINDS, don't get advice from somebody who got it from NICHD. Totally different review process. Okay. Electronic submission is unforgiving. One time I heard a number that 25% of submitted grants are turned back for being incomplete. Okay? You have it in by 5 o'clock on the submission date, and if it's not right, you get to do it again 4 months later. Okay? There's almost nothing is forgivable with CSR. So get it in early and check it. You have an opportunity to check it once it's uploaded. Your business offices will make mistakes, right? They have lots of grants to upload. They'll sometimes upload 2 of this section and none of that section. Or they'll upload the wrong section because you've given them multiple versions. Check it. I'm sure you've heard this lots. It's reviewed by experts and non-experts. It's really true. Think about me, right? I was an ion channel biophysicist. I don't understand anything that any of you do. And I can see all of your specific aims and I can tell you what I think of it. Okay? Because it's about science. I may not know the disease, I may not know the relevant methods, but I can tell you whether you have a good set of specific aims or you have no chance of getting funded. And I often tell people, I cannot tell you what will be funded. Right? I absolutely cannot tell you what will be funded, but I can certainly tell you what will not be funded. And I don't even know what you're doing to know that. Get these grants read. Your first draft will be terrible. All of you, I don't care who you are, your first draft will be terrible. Lori's first draft is terrible. Okay? Get it read by somebody who will hate it. Okay? It's the only thing that's valuable. People who like your application, they're of no value. All right? You need people to hate it and tell you what's wrong with it. Because if they don't, the reviewers will. Seriously, right? Thicken that skin and get people to hate your writing and live with it. what needs to be, right, which part's most important? Oh, a third, and a third is part this, part that, it's part none, right? Everything should be wonderful, all right? We were talking about this yesterday, the specific aims. I was told when I started writing grants 100 years ago that you will get it or not get it on your specific aims page. At the time, these grants were 25 pages long. I said, well, what are the other 24 pages for? And they said it's just to back up what they thought of you on your specific aims page. And sometimes it changes. But I can tell you as a reviewer on study section for 6 years, I knew the score I was giving that application after the specific aims page. It's shocking how that works. Sometimes it changes. Sometimes you shoot yourself in the foot and a good score will go down after they've read it. Sometimes you can rescue yourself after they've fallen asleep during your aims page. But your aims page needs to be really, really good. We have an investigator we sometimes have trotted out in epilepsy meetings who has never gotten into double-digit scores. And he says he spends 9 months working on his specific aims page. It's a little excessive, but the point is, you're not going to sit down and write it and be done with it, right? It's going to filter, it's going to percolate, you're going to hate it, whatever you write. Especially after you write down your experiments to test your hypotheses, go back and see whether your experiments test your hypotheses. You have to change your hypotheses. So this new thing, scientific premise, all the rigor stuff, NIH kind of treats this like a checklist. The review sections are not quite learning to deal with it right yet. But let me just tell you, scientific premise is if you are doing clinical studies and basing it on preclinical work, it is not that there was a paper published that showed some preclinical data, therefore my clinical work is justified. It's how good was the preclinical data. And I think you probably heard about that in this meeting. You need to now understand the preclinical data and whether it was any good or not. And again, you don't want to waste your time doing clinical studies that can't possibly work, right? And that's what NINDS found. We have wasted hundreds of millions of dollars on clinical trials that are based on preclinical data that was no good. And so that's what started all of this. All of this stuff is important. Don't skip any of it, don't forget any of it. People often rush their grants, they don't have time to address it, and you won't get it. Give yourself enough time. I'd give yourself 6 months to write any grants. It's obviously not full time, but you're going to need that amount of time. Clinical trials, the question is, can you do it? The significance is not whether that disease is a bad disease. Most people acknowledge that a disease is a bad disease. And it's not really about whether it's rare or not rare. There are sometimes reviewers who worry about whether this is the most important thing to be doing, it's so rare. But in general, it's not about how rare a disease is, how big a burden it is in society. It's whether you're doing, whether your research is important and whether you can do it. To do a clinical trial on a K, you need to have the resources. $50,000 is not really enough to do most clinical trials. You're probably not qualified to just run a clinical trial by yourself. So the most common approach is piggybacking an ancillary study on the back of an ongoing clinical trial to get yourself going. But you will not be funded in a K just to analyze data on a trial that somebody else has designed. It's not going to happen. Right? You need to have your own study that you've designed, but it can be attached to somebody else's trial. It's a good way to do it. You need to have a project that has legs. Again, the point of a K is to give you the time to get up and running to get to an R. If the project is a dead-end project at the end of the K, that K's been wasted. Obviously sometimes things don't work, right? The only science worth doing could potentially not work. But it can't be designed to end. You need to get the appropriate training, you need to be in the appropriate environment. We see that a lot with clinicians. They're really passionate about a project, where there is no infrastructure or expertise at their institution to do it. It's going to be awfully hard to get a K to do research when you don't have the infrastructure or the expertise to do it. You can't say, I have a mentor that's 1,000 miles away who's an expert. It doesn't work because you need better mentorship. We'll talk about that in a minute. Oh, we'll talk about that now. Mentorship, I'm getting tired of using that word. I think I've said it as many times as I'm allowed to in a lifetime. I do not mean touchy-feely. People are supposed to hold your hand and help you get where you're going, although they should. What you need is appropriate guidance. And I was sitting here today listening to these talks, and maybe not a great analogy, but think to yourself, after you sit here for a week and listen to all these talks by all of these experts, next week, are you going to be an expert in everything? No. Right? So you need mentorship, you need guidance, you need an expert. Right? Well, is your primary mentor going to be an expert in everything that you hear this week? Unlikely. Right? So you need multiple mentors. You need the expertise in every phase of what you're doing to have expertise, and then you need to make use of them. So one of the biggest problems we have with clinicians is their mentorship. Okay? That's all. Right? You're all smart enough, you're all dedicated enough, you all have interesting enough projects. You just screw up. And we all blame that on your mentors, not on you. Okay, although you could be at fault. And so it's not about holding your hand, it's about getting advice. So we poll residents, fellows, K holders. We ask them all, anonymously, how often do you meet with your mentor? And we get the same answer from all of them. Once a month. Once a month? If you were a resident, remember back when you were residents? First year, second year? Did people say, go in and treat patients for a month and come back and talk to me about it? Right? I don't think so. Right? It's not the way science is done. You should be meeting with your mentors at least once a week. I don't care if you're doing clinical research, say, oh, nothing's happening. Right? That's baloney, nothing's happening. Why are we paying you if nothing's happening? You should be talking. You don't have to sit for an hour once a week, maybe, although maybe you should. But you should be touching base with your mentors all the time. And if you get a really big name mentor, the world's expert in whatever, as your mentor, but they don't have time to talk to you, then it's not going to be very valuable to you, right? So you've got to have mentors that you can see with reasonable frequency. Maybe you don't need to see a statistician as often as you see your primary mentor, right? You need to have a plan that makes sense, but you will need guidance. Otherwise, just go get an R01 right now if you don't need guidance. Really, I just can't, that's why I use the word mentorship too much, right? People are not talking to the people they need to talk to often enough. And you sit and you either go up the wrong avenue or you have problems, you have recruitment problems. You go for months not recruiting anybody, but you're not telling anybody that you're having problems, right? You need to solve your problems when they happen, not wait around for a month. Protect your protected time. Don't let people steal it from you. 75% is calculatable. Half a day a week is 10% of your time. 1 day a week is 20% of your time. Right? It's not hours. Measure it in pieces of days. A month is 8% of your time for the year. Okay? Do not let people take it. If they need you to cover for somebody on vacation, get it back. We are paying for the K because you have promised us 75% of your time. And your chair has promised us that. Okay? Don't let anybody steal it from you. And don't voluntarily give it up. I understand you have patients that you want to deal with. Right? But you've said you'll devote 75% effort to the K. And if you don't, you're not going to get to where you're going. Balancing, what your grant you've already had, you want to publish, but your next grant could have different data. How do you decide, what am I doing? Am I working on the publication or am I working on my next grant? That's a tough one. I don't have an answer. Go talk to a mentor. That's a tough balancing act. Devote enough time. Just as a rule of thumb, I'd give it 6 months. Okay? May not take you that long, but plan. This is kind of a repeat. Obstacles to success. If you are going to have problems, if you foresee problems, face it head on in the grant. Let the reviewers know that you know that that problem is hanging out there. Otherwise, they're going to think you don't know, which is way worse than you're acknowledging that it's out there. And here's what I'll do if it happens. Don't hide from problems. Reviewers will see them. Appropriate controls. I suppose probably you've heard that this week at some point about controls. Right? Controls, sample size, you've probably heard that a couple of times this week. Get it right. Lots of grants fail, lots of studies fail. There's all the problems you're hearing this week. It's real life. At the end of the day, will you have a definitive answer to the specific question you're asking? Or, can I have $1 million, please? I'm going to come up with no answer to no question. Right? I mean, so come up with an answer. Do a study that's going to come up with an answer. I've said this. This is about, again, getting started on multi-center trials. Either go for KO2 if you don't get the experience in your K, or team up with a senior investigator who's an expert in multi-center trials. I don't like that approach as much for various reasons. It is a way to do it. You're not gaining independence from them, but it can work if you've got the right collaborator. This you would think should not be said, but when you talk about success rates are actually much higher than the numbers reveal, because there's a lot of slop that comes in the door that has no chance, right? After reading a page of your application, you've already told the reviewers that you're sloppy. And then you know, the stuff we see, incomplete sentences, right? Hypotheses that are not hypotheses. I hypothesize that this will work. That's not a hypothesis. Really, read it, read every line, every word. Is that the right word? Is this the right sentence? Does this paragraph follow this paragraph? Get it all right. That's why it's going to take you 6 months, plus a bunch of people hating it. Don't be boring as hard, but you've got really interesting topics, so it's a little easier for you. Don't take rejection personally. It is not about you. It is not that nobody in Nebraska gets funded. People who write good grants in Nebraska get funded. It is not because you're a clinician. It is not because you do animal studies. It's not because of anything other than your application wasn't good enough. Don't take it personally. I say here, don't get frustrated. You are going to get frustrated. I guess what I mean is get over it. Right? Stomp your feet. I had an advantage over all of you. Probably none of you remember metal filing cabinets. I had a metal filing cabinet. It was back to government property metal filing cabinet, and I would take my key and scratch it. It was great. Do what you need to do to get over it. And then read the reviews again. The reviewers are mostly right. When they're wrong, be respectful. Oh, I don't have that slide yet. Fix the problems. One of the worst things that NIH has done in my lifetime is they're getting your summary statements back fast enough so that you can submit the next cycle. You usually have about 2 weeks. Right? You can't fix a grant in 2 weeks. This was intended for the situation where I'm going to use a mouse and the mouse doesn't exist, and you come back 2 weeks later and say, here's the mouse. Right? You cannot fix a grant with a poor score in 2 weeks. But chairs pressure you, you pressure you, you come back in, and then you get a worse score. Because the reviewers are really irritated that they worked so hard reading your grants and you didn't fix it. Right? Don't pay attention to that stuff. Right? It's unlimited submissions, right? It's not a lottery, it's not throwing darts. Make it a good one. Don't just keep sending it in. You'll keep getting a bad score and a bad score. Get advice from your mentor. First, read the summary statement, digest it, get over the frustration, digest it, talk to your mentor, both of you get over the frustration, get it out of your system, answer the questions, and then talk to your NIH program director. NINDS, we tend to be very responsive. Some of you will have program directors that are not very responsive, but if you're in K-land and you're not reaching a program director, you can reach me, and I can walk down the hall and reach your program director. Get help from NIH, that is our job. Right? Our job is not to thwart you. You are our investment. We are investing money in you. We want you to succeed. The best result is that every single person in this room gets their grants. Okay, we're not trying to weed you out. This is the one I was talking about. Don't put it back in too quickly. Fix it first. I wasn't even told I needed a dog. I happen to have a dog and a cat, but these are not my dog and cat. I've used this slide for years because we get responses to reviewers that essentially are saying, God, you reviewers are stupid, right? And they're the ones that's still done with a pen, right? And they're holding the pen, and you know what they do when they hear that? They go, ND, save me from reading your grant. You want to call me stupid? ND, right there you go. Be respectful. Reviewers get it wrong. Reviewers will say things like, they didn't say this, right? And you know you wrote it on page 62. Don't say, well, if the reviewer had read my grant, they would have seen it on page 62, right? The correct answer is, I'm sorry it wasn't clear, it is now on page 62, right? Be respectful. These people are working hard and they want to help you. It is not an adversarial system, right? They want to help you. You need to give them the ammo to help you. Get in touch. As I said, it is our job to help you. It is my job to see that you get your K, right? Once you go into R01 world, it's Adam's job. But if you are applying for K, at NINDS, the program directors help you with the science. I help you with the K application, the mentorship plan, the career development plan, how you're structuring the whole thing. I can help you with that. I can't help you with the science. I don't know what you're going to do. You need to speak to a scientific expert. Get help. We're all there to help you. So thanks. Lunch is back there. I will be here and happy to take any questions now or later. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Dr. Korn. Maybe we'll take one question and then we'll let people go over for lunch.
That was a great talk. So my question is do you think that the success rate of the K in getting additional awards down the line is the name K or the training that you get when you do the K, so the learning plan that you get? Because there are alternative paths that people are taking these days where they do the same training at the end of the day.
The name K has no value. It is that when you submit an R01 or a U or whatever grant you're submitting, the reviewers are evaluating what is on that paper. They're evaluating you based on your accomplishments, based on what you've written and are your ideas good, is the research solid, is it important, all that stuff. How you've been funded in your past is of no relevance to the reviewers. And again, this is an NIH talk. NIH money is no better than anybody else's money. And we're even okay when you get a K from us and you go off to another institute and help them. Doesn't matter where your money comes